I will suggest some or I suggest you as well to enter in some topics, about this particular, let's say, segment or market about the personal injuries regarding the tourist industry and the tourist customer, at the end of the day. So.
Hello, my name's Chris Deacon. I'm a partner in the Aviation and International Injury Department at Stewarts in London, UK. I specialise in representing individuals who suffer life-changing injuries in an international context, usually individuals living in the UK who are seriously injured travelling overseas, be that for business or pleasure, and also international visitors to the UK. I'm delighted to be making this contribution to the World Law Congress panel on tourism and personal injuries, and I'm sorry that I could not be there in person this summer to join you in New York for this prestigious international gathering. Global tourism has returned with a vengeance following the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, the UK's Office for National Statistics estimates that the UK received over 31 million overseas visitors. And it seems UK residents love to travel too, with an estimated 71 million visits abroad in 2022, most frequently for holidays. For those who are involved in life-changing incidents whilst travelling, there are added challenges with access to justice in a cross-border context. Those challenges have increased following Brexit. One of the greatest advantages of the European regime on judicial cooperation in civil and commercial matters, the Brussels regulations and the Lugano Convention, is that European regime provides additional safeguards for weaker parties to a dispute on the question of jurisdiction and enforcement of any judgments from proceedings brought in the courts of an EU member state in reliance on the European regime. In particular, a serious injury victim can rely on the special jurisdiction rules to pursue a claim for damages in their home court against a defendant domiciled in another EU member state in the following key circumstances: pursuing an insurer directly where such a direct right of action is permitted, which is notably the case for all EU motor accidents, but also for some claims against hotels or other tortfeasors in a tourism context. Pursuing a claim against the other party to a contract if injured while enjoying services as part of a consumer contract, common examples of which include holiday accommodation, excursions, or activities. Also under the European regime, you can more easily join an EU-based defendant to proceedings against a co-defendant who is based in the member state whose courts are seized of the action. And it's then possible to easily enforce a judgment in any EU member state arising from proceedings brought pursuant to the European regime on jurisdiction. Those additional protections have been lost in the UK, making access to justice for UK tourists injured in the EU 27 member states considerably harder. We've attempted to import consumer and employment contract jurisdictional protections into UK domestic law. However, the rules on jurisdiction and enforcement must now be examined on a case-by-case basis, increasing costs and causing additional delay in individuals pursuing a claim for damages, often in circumstances where they will have urgent rehabilitation, care, medical treatment, accommodation needs following serious injury abroad. The UK's reaccession to the Lugano Convention would plug some of the gaps that Brexit has created in the field of access to justice for cross-border injury victims, but the EU has indicated it is unwilling to permit the UK's reaccession to Lugano at this time. This has the biggest impact on individuals, as commercial parties have the resources to find alternative routes to resolving their disputes and also benefit from the Hague 2005 Convention on choice of court agreements, which specifically excludes consumer contracts. There have been continued efforts at the Hague Conference on Private International Law to introduce new multilateral treaties in the field of enforcement and jurisdiction. The Hague Judgments Convention 2019 will go some way to assisting cross-border injury victims, but it has significant limitations for injury victims seeking to enforce a judgment from the English courts in a claim for damages following an injury overseas. The biggest issue post-Brexit, therefore, is perhaps less one of whether the English courts will accept jurisdiction, as the jurisdictional rules in England have a wide reach, but whether the courts of the country where the victim then seeks enforcement of the English judgment against the defendant, the foreign defendant, will recognise that judgment in view of the basis on which the English court has accepted jurisdiction. This was always a feature in serious international injury cases brought against non-EU defendants pre-Brexit, but it's now a concern that has extended to the EU and has to be addressed on a case-by-case basis for an additional 27 countries, many of which are visited frequently by British tourists. Brexit really has brought about a seismic change to the UK's private international law landscape and is having a direct impact on access to justice in tourist-related personal injury claims. Another area of concern in the field of tourism and personal injuries is the growing category of medical tourism cases, which pose their own difficulties, not only with the victim being able to access justice in a suitable forum, but also when establishing liability because of the divergent standards on medical treatment in some of the countries most popular for tourism-based cosmetic and medical procedures, for example, Turkey. One of the ways in which British tourists can better protect themselves if something goes wrong whilst they're on holiday is to book a regulated package holiday. This imposes liability on the UK-based tour operator for any non-compliance that occurs whilst the holidaymaker is enjoying services forming part of the package holiday contract. British holidaymakers are well advised to ensure any holiday excursions are booked prior to travel as part of the package holiday, or alternatively to rely on the consumer contract basis for jurisdiction in the UK, which is made easier where the excursion is booked before from the UK before travelling overseas. If a holiday activity is priced at £100 or more, then the holidaymaker should use a credit card, as additional protections are available under the Consumer Credit Act, enabling the cardholder to ultimately seek redress from the credit card provider for the negligence of the supplier of services booked and paid for using a credit card. For Brits travelling to the USA, access to justice via the courts may be reasonably straightforward, with the contingency fee basis for funding a claim offering flexibility and minimum risk for the victim of a serious injury. In my experience, the best results in these cases come from collaboration and sharing of risk between lawyers based in the victim's home jurisdiction and the place where the claim is being brought, be that a UK victim injured in a US state or a US victim injured whilst visiting the UK. For UK victims injured in the US, the most common surprise is the low levels of insurance available, particularly for motor accidents, as in the UK we have unlimited insurance for bodily injury claims and a guarantee fund, the Motor Insurers Bureau, in the event a vehicle is untraced or uninsured. For US victims injured in the UK, it is important to explore all options for pursuing a claim, as often the victim will secure a more favourable outcome by proceeding in the UK, where costs are recoverable in addition to damages. Whilst enforcement of a judgment between the US and UK ought to be more straightforward and certain than it is now between the UK and each individual EU member state, certainly as things stand and pending further bilateral or multilateral conventions, enforcement proceedings can still delay victims in securing much needed compensation. Such risk, delay, uncertainty and additional costs must be at the forefront of considerations when advising victims of international tourism accidents and when considering the steps that we can take through international cooperation and lawmaking to ensure the very best access to justice for vulnerable injury victims and weaker parties to disputes. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to make this contribution to the World Law Congress. I wish you all a successful gathering and shall be pleased to answer any questions you may have by email or telephone.
Okay, we can start, for example, you. It's okay.
Hello, my name is Francesco Isolabella. I'm one of the founder partner of my firm. We are criminal lawyers, what call crime criminal law. So just criminal lawyers from middle 90s, and this is a peculiar focus, peculiar field, I would say. But it's important as well. I mean, this morning I've heard about rule of law, okay? The rule of law provides and requires harmonization between all the countries, all the laws from all the countries. And the harmonization of the laws means to be able to face the same things in the same way. This would be the ideal goal of everybody and of every country. Sometimes when we are just back from the anti-corruption panel, and in that field, or anti-money laundering, or anti-market abuse crimes, in that fields probably some kind of harmonization has been reached. In other fields, it's not so easy. The injuries, just to provide you some numbers. Before COVID, we had 65 million visitors in Italy. When I mean visitors, I mean tourists. When I mean tourists, I mean people who come to Italy just to enjoy themselves, to enjoy the culture, to enjoy the food, etc. Not for business, not for other reasons. Now, after the COVID, there are 55 million, which means the really high percentage of injuries because of you can sleep on a stone, you can be invested by a car, you can crash down somewhere, you can eat something wrong, somebody could take your wallet, take your watch from you, a lot of things. And in 55 million situations, you can imagine how many injuries we can face. Let's take another example of Milan. Milan is a growing city. It's a small city. I'm from Milan. It's a really small city, but it's growing up a lot. And the last year, we had 200,000 denunce, criminal denunce, for whatever kind of crime. Crime put with voluntas, crime, malicious crimes, and crime for mea culpa, so not willing crimes. But even crimes, if I invest somebody with my car, and if I don't do it voluntarily, it means that it's a culpa. So it's a misdemeanor, but could be really hard. Now, what does it happen to the tourists who come to Milan? How can they defend themselves? How can they do? So we have, everybody of us in every country, there is a civil field and a criminal field. Okay. The criminal field has also in Italy the possibility for the victim to open a civil case within the criminal case. Okay, that's fine. But we have not the possibility to do it in both sides, not in the criminal side and not in the civil side. We have made a choice. Okay, if we choose the criminal side, we have to stop the civil one. Okay, but let's go forward and let's think about the damages. When I mean damages, I mean also the costs. So I've been invested by a car. I mean, it occurred to me in some cases pretty recently. A colleague of mine, and of you obviously, from Canada, he just come to visit Italy, and in that specific case, Venice, he took a taxi boat, and the taxi boat colluded with a piece of wood that comes from the sea. You know, the kind of piece of wood that separates the channels. We call it the dolphins. I mean, you probably call it dolphins. It had, the father, my colleague, had been hurted very, very badly on the neck. So now, after 3 years, he has not the possibility to walk by himself. So he had to be helped. So we started on immediately a criminal case. But in the criminal case, Venice is a peculiar city. Every city in wherever I do believe, but in Italy, it has a peculiarity, which means has his own way to detect, to read, to interpret the law. So, which means that if you're not Venetian, could be a problem for you, even if you are from Milan, 250 kilometers from Venice. So from a person from Canada, so I had to go to a colleague of mine from Venice. Please help me in asking for that, which is costs. And so it's cost. I mean, every hour is a cost. Every 10 hours is a cost, etc. And he had been hurted. He had to pay lawyers. He has the insurance, but how does it work, the insurance? So after 2 years proceeding, just to make a long story very short, the judge accepted to sue the taxi driver. But in the charge, they wrote down, you are a victim, you have been notified with this document. If you are not be present during the first hearing, it means that you are quitting, that you do not want anymore to proceed, because if you want to proceed, you have to be present. Okay? This is a misinterpretation of our Supreme Court to, I would say, to diminish the cases. Now, 200,000 in Milan. So how can we do? We cannot face every case. So how can we do to select the important ones? One is, you're present, okay, let's go on. If you're not present, let's forget it. But he had been hurted. He wanted to be present, but he couldn't be present. And we have not a law which certainly provides the possibility to be heard, to be interviewed from distance. And we have now from 217, in EU, with a European order, investigation order. We have applied it, adopted it through a directive, EU directive in 2014, and in EU system, we have the possibility, even the victims, to ask for an investigation directly, not passing through the rogatory request, etc., but directly through the prosecutor. But not through Canada, not through US, unless the specific convention provides. So it's a problem. And again, after 2 years, I say to my colleague, maybe it's much better for you that, I mean, you have nothing to, you're a colleague of mine, don't pay anything, but sue this guy in a civil case from Canada, not from Italy. Because from Canada, you probably could reach much more result. So, but I was a colleague of him. I didn't ask for any money. But if he would have been a normal person, he should have paid a lot of money for lawyers to reach anything. In other cases, then I promise I shut up. But in other cases, if somebody takes your wallet or your watch, the most of the times these guys have nothing. Probably these guys come from Arabia or Central Africa. They come from shipping to Italy. This is a very big problem from Italy, from Europe. And they take your wallet, they take your watch, they probably hurt you, they have nothing to repay you. Who is going to repay you? So I was touching this issue with, for example, a very important broker, insurance broker. And they say that it's an issue. Italy should, like US in certain cases does, should oblige visitors to be covered by insurance. But even if you are covered by insurance, the insurance should put a down payment whenever it occurs damage to you. Somebody should pay a down payment to pay lawyers, whatever. You have not to pay anything, unless the insurance discovers that you are frauding the insurance. But if you are not, you should be covered by any cost, which is not now, which is not anywhere. So, which is the way, the best way, the possible way to obtain the rule of law in this field, and harmonization in this field? To me, through a kind of insurance alliance that oblige, or an insurance fund, like a fund of guarantee that exists to repay the financial damages or whatever. So such a fund should cover the real concrete risk that the tourists run, not only to come into Italy, but to go everywhere. I mean, this is my point of view. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay.
Well, I'll continue. My name is Andrés Díaz. I'm from Colombia. Our law firm, Pava, Díaz, Arana. We thank also Cremades, which have been so kind with the organization of the event and everything. So great. And my intervention, my speech, I think it matches perfectly with what Francesco has been saying, because Francesco has been speaking about the injuries caused to tourists, right? Which is certainly a way of maybe addressing this panel, this topic. But I thought it through when I was preparing my speech, and I'm gonna try to present the same topic, which is tourism and personal injuries, but from the side of the tourist aggressor, if you would. And of course, tourism, I'm a criminal lawyer, and tourism is of course an issue in criminal law in Colombia specifically, because, well, from your side view of the risk that tourists take going to Colombia, well, I don't have to say it. Sadly, it's a risk not only in Colombia. Maybe I think I'm the only Latin America here, but like in the region, unfortunately, insecurity it's a big issue, and of course, you can get a lot more injuries than just a car crash. Colombia it's a country that's been in a conflict, in a civil conflict or armed internal conflict for decades. So of course, everyone knows that could happen. That goes beyond saying. But also, Colombia, it's right now suffering as from another criminal phenomenon, which is criminal tourism. I will try to explain what I mean. Well, the most obvious case for Colombia, it's of course drug tourism. You know, it's going to Colombia to consume drugs. Of course, not import them, but to consume them, which is of course a crime in Colombia, and that itself should be more than enough for me to talk about how the drug tourism works in Colombia. But sadly, we've got even worse issues in criminal tourism. One of them is sexual tourism, and more explicitly, child prostitution tourism. That's a nasty issue, and one of the most nasty issues we've got with tourism. So I've got plenty to say, not just about tourists being victims, but how, not even only in Colombia, but in third world countries, how tourism is a criminal phenomenon worth studying in itself. But now I'm going to talk about another phenomenon, which is, I think it's as nasty, or maybe could be a little bit worse than the two mentioned, which is maternity, surrogative or surrogate maternity. That is, and it's a picky subject. It's tricky to talk about that because it's not per se at all blameworthy or at all should we say reproved per se. You know, you cannot in any possible scenario defend child sexuality tourism. That's of course it's hideous but surrogate maternity it's much more complex. It's much more complex because it's not necessarily a wrong issue that you would try to prevent, but it does hide some pretty serious consequences for third world countries and specifically Colombia. Just to put a context in all of this, the first surrogate maternity case that I encountered in the preparation of this talk was actually here in the United States in 1976, and it's become quite popular around the world ever since. Of course, there's I think two big reasons why one might do maternity surrogative, or as you put it in English. Well, the first one, it's quite easy to address, which is for aesthetic reasons. Because a woman does not want her body to change, so she pays another female to carry the child. I think that's an easy case because mostly in the regulations, mostly it's forbidden. And even in an ethical point of view, it's quite simple to address. But the more complex one is, of course, when there's health issues that prevent a woman from having a child in a, let's say, natural pregnancy, or not natural, maybe ordinarily pregnancy, right? Because there is a conflict. I mean, myself, I've got an internal conflict between the goodness that this brings to a family who wants to bear a child and cannot, but versus the risk, especially from the from the point of view of the maybe public policy in a country that could, well, say could end up being a modern form of slavery or human trafficking. And just to put maybe some data in the table and of course discuss it, in Colombia, the surrogate maternity costs around, got it here, $4,000 to $10,000. In Europe and United States, that's way higher. I'm talking about $100,000 to $150,000 that you should pay to do it. So that, of course, brings a lot of interest for going to developing countries. And that puts an issue, I think, because we've seen, for example, it's called by the media the Nasciturus cartel, which is actually something absolutely horrible, which is forced pregnant women and then selling the unborn child to the highest bidder. Okay, so that's like human trafficking before being born. That's insanely wild what that represents. And of course, being the big picture, you have to be aware of those risks. So that's why maybe the worldwide it's so divided in this subject, because you've got countries where it's absolutely prohibited, the surrogate maternity, like let's say Spain, Italy, Austria, France, Germany, Switzerland, Burkina Faso, Marruecos, Egypt, China. You've got maybe the most part of the countries where it's allowed strictly non-profit type, right? You cannot profit out of the surrogate maternity, which is Brazil, Cuba, Uruguay, Canada, UK, Greece, India, South Africa, Australia. You can do it, it's legal, but you cannot pay nor receive payment for it. And there are a few which it's openly legal and openly profitable. For example, Ukraine and Russia, which have it regulated, and it's a legal business to be. In Colombia, it's not regulated whatsoever. And actually, that is the norm in most part of Latin America. It's neither prohibited nor regulated. And of course, we all come from similar traditions where if it's not prohibited, well, it is permitted. But the absence of regulations, well, exposes the liable party, which is usually the mother, the surrogate mother, to all types of abuses. Right now, we're trying to regulate it, but it's been 15 times that the bill is tried to be passed in the Congress, and it has not been possible. The last one was merely 4 months ago in February, and the regulation in Colombia, it's first it states that only because health issues, okay, no, not because aesthetic issues. The mother who wants to be a mother and wants to rent, if you will, a uterus for it, needs to prove that she has a health issue that prevents her from carrying the child. It's forbidden to pay for it, so it goes with the majority of countries who says, okay, you cannot pay for it. It's only for, of course, mothers which are older than 18 years old, and it's only for nationals. You cannot go and tourists. You cannot come to Colombia and pay for do it. And of course, there's an extra issue which I won't address because I want to be short in my statement. I just want to put it on the table, which is the non-retractability after the agreement, right? That has to be enforced. But in the same time in Colombia, you can interrupt the pregnancy up to the 24th week, which is actually a pretty broad term in terms of comparative law, right? It's bigger than Spain, for example. So you have to, it's
How is
free.
one interrupted? In terms of aborting?
Abortion, yeah, abortion.
Or changing the mind and keeping the baby?
No, okay, so it's impossible to change your mind and keep the baby, but
No,
constitutionally you can abort freely, if I may use that word. I think in Spain it's 14 weeks, in Colombia it's 24. So then, what happens, right? So I just wanted to bring this to the table because, yeah. Retract, but you can abort.
But you can abort.
Right,
Which
yeah.
means that
Right.
if you want your baby,
Right.
you would like to have your baby.
Right, you say, okay, I aborted, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
It's insane, yeah. It's insane, but it's so difficult because, you cannot just prohibit abortion for that specific mother, because that would be constitutionally inadmissible, right? But on the other side, you need to have an agreement that can be enforced, because. And I end with that. How do we regulate that, and how do we end up not being the Nasciturus cartel when it starts, pregnant? We're in a conflict of 50 years, civil conflict, right? Where you have forced child abduction to the war, where you have, of course, all that. And how can you regulate this subject without turning the most vulnerable mothers, poor mothers, into modern slaves? Thanks.
Thank you very much, Andrés.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So my name is Jeff Korek. I served as past president of the New York State Trial Lawyers Association, and which covers from Brooklyn all the way up to Buffalo. It's a big state. We have 10 million people just in the city, and the state has probably a few more million. But in any event, I'm very grateful to Rafael and to your firm. And, just sitting, listening to you, both of you, it's incredible because I'm picturing, and I was telling my daughter, who I'm very lucky and fortunate, she's a former prosecutor who's been prosecuting in Brooklyn some of the miscreants of sexual abuse against children and otherwise. And even though she's so young, she's seen so many terrible things already, and she's now a part of our firm. But what is mind-blowing to me is you come to this, and I think of these rooms that we're in this beautiful building, perhaps not as beautiful as the European or as old, but maybe they took care of the Constitution in 1776 by running back and forth to rooms and discussing different topics. Maybe the formation of the United Nations, previously the League of Nations, was discovered by people running back and forth rooms. How do we get more countries involved? So this forum even is so different to us, and it's so much better than PowerPoint presentations and listening for hours, and rather the exchange of ideas. And to you to talk to me more so than Francesco, that I can relate more to, because ours is more pedestrian here in New York, perhaps as in Milan or in Rome, where we have accident lawsuits, we have medical malpractice lawsuits, somebody slips, somebody falls, somebody's in a car accident. But the concepts of what you're talking about, it's mind-blowing. These are things where, you know, we feel so, I do anyway, humbled to be in the presence of topics that are affecting the world, and also somewhat embarrassed. Here you have a constitutional right to have an abortion. Our Supreme Court is debating whether my daughter has, this woman has control of their body. It's crazy. So these are the things that we're dealing with, and we realize, you know, in other countries it's even more developed. We have many problems in New York because we have so many people, we have so many ideas, and we're so liberal. We have, you know, you mentioned drugs. We have a big fentanyl problem.
Right.
We have a big cannabis problem without regulation, and 150 stores selling marijuana everywhere that are not licensed to do so, and a city police force that for the most part is not doing much. It doesn't necessarily relate to us bringing lawsuits to redress it, but there's other elements of the law that have to deal with that. So on the more pedestrian level, compared to what you've been talking about, let me just tell you what's going on in New York. We have, I have to put my glasses on. In 2022, so last year's numbers, we welcomed more than 863,000 visitors from the United Kingdom came to our little city, 418,000 from Spain, and 398,000 from Italy. On average, tourists from the UK spend about $1,400 visiting New York City on their stays. It's probably even more than that. Tourists from Italy spend about the same, and Spain also about the same. You contribute billions of dollars to diverse New York City industries, including lodging, transportation, food. I mean, I don't have to tell you, just like Italy is, you know, one of the best places in the world to go to, Spain, so is New York. I'm not sure Colombia, forgive me, it's not the tourist site that we've become. There are 1,700 parks in New York City. I'm not talking about the state, the city. Playgrounds and recreational spaces equivalent to 14% of the city's geographic areas. Every part of our city is within reach by subways, buses, taxis, rideshare services, or even bicycles. We have bicycle lanes and bicycle programs. In fact, I'm working now on a case where there was a campaign by the mayor at the time, Mayor Bloomberg, who was thought of, and still is in many ways, as a businessman who came and brought business concepts and wanted to make this essentially a motor car free city. And so we had bicycle lanes and bicycle lanes all over, and we put up signs, and some of it was done well, some of it not so well. And the truth is, I grew up in Brooklyn, born and bred. My parents, born and bred, and came from Russia and Poland, but lived here most of their lives. I would never get on a bicycle and ride in those bicycle lanes. I have clients, mostly tourists, some from Canada, who come, work here, architects. They see the posters, ride your bike, save the environment. It's quicker, it's easier, it's better. And they get it taken in by it. And they get hit by our cars, our trucks. We have bike lanes. We have cases with bike lanes that start out, you know, and you can relate to this because you're also a New York City lawyer. They start you off in the right lane, And then they want you to continue on the other side of the street for a left lane, and you never see it because, you know, after a few weeks or months here with our potholes and everything else, whatever's painted on the streets gets taken away. And we have people that are losing legs, arms, getting killed. We have trucks that are on the same streets as the bicyclists that are, you know, tremendous. So we have created some of our own problems, and our tourists are, I don't want to say, because I don't have any numbers on it, but they're in good part getting the brunt of what typical New Yorkers would never do. I just wanted to just hit on some of the other.
That's a very interesting point. We suffer a lot in Italy as well as Spain with the bicycles. Initially, the town board in Madrid, they decided to allow bicycles to go through the street, the road.
On the sidewalk.
There were a lot of accidents. And then one day, old lady was dead because of one bicycle. And then the mayor decided to keep immediately because there were a lot of bad news in the newspapers. But it's a kind of political damages that at the end of the day, someone has to pay.
Correct.
And the companies who release the bicycles has very low insurance policies. And even though they do not have
Well,
an insurance.
one of the things I am proud of in the States in general, and I was talking to another fellow from Argentina who says the insurance, and I'm sure like a lot of countries, is not developed as we have here. You cannot build a building in New York without layers of insurance so that if someone gets injured, there's insurance even up to $100 million. Theoretically, nobody recovers that, but that's the exposure that they have because they'll shut you down in 5 minutes if they find out there's no insurance. And each one is layered. We have our buses all insured by our city, so there's layers and layers of insurance. You cannot put a car on the street without at least minimal insurance, which is not always terrific, but you can, on behalf of, if you're a person of some means, they don't have to be affluent, but some means, you buy for relatively inexpensive premiums under insurance, which means you put your car on the street for $25,000 because maybe you don't make a lot of money, you're irresponsible, whatever it is. You hit somebody in my family, I bought insurance in case that happens. It adds to your insurance. So we have a very robust insurance system in place, which allows us compensation, whereas I think in many other countries, you don't get it. And we have, we also have the abuses that go with that, which are fraudulent cases, and all, and the rumors of, people getting money for things that they don't deserve. Of course, like everywhere else, that's true, and that's the ill we suffer for allowing a lot of people to have lawsuits. My firm does a lot of medical malpractice work, and we have the benefit of whatever hospital you go to, with the exception of maybe one or two, which are teetering in terms of staying in business, out of business. But for the most part, I would say 95% of our hospitals are very well insured. If there's a claim to be made, you never have to worry about there being the support to pay whatever the judgment or the settlement is. We have 62 hospitals in our city. We have hospitals in every borough. We have city hospitals that attend to the less affluent. We have hospitals with mandates now to take in pretty much everybody. So that's never an issue.
That is the problem in Italy. Now the big problem, I'm learning a lot about malpractice. And a lot of hospitals now have a problem because they have not insurance, they have not coverage, they have to cover by themselves. Yeah. Because the insurance are too high. So they work as a private companies, and sometimes they are not able to cover the risk, and they are not able to pay the insurance. So it's a problem to go to that hospital if you're not covered by your insurance.
This is what I believe the question you suggest or you table is that if every tourist should have an insurance before take out, because otherwise it's a dangerous situation, not only for
Yeah. With the exception, quite frankly, of the United States.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, I know all our problems, you know, I'd like to think I do.
This is not your problem.
This is not our problem. Exactly, very well said. This is not our problem. And then, you know, I'm always amazed too, you know, these presentations and this whole conference is so terrific, because I was telling Rafael just a moment ago, you think of New York City, you know, we are the center of the world, everything happens here, and then you remind yourself when you're at a place like this, we're a small part. You know, people in Rome, in Milan, maybe they feel the same way, Colombia, Spain, we're all small parts. And there's nothing so special about New York City.
Yeah, but it's also true that the United States is the first market in the tourism. So it's
Yes.
a lot of things happening around in the personal tourism industry.
But it's also because we're so liberal with so many of the laws, particularly in New York.
And in Spain, I think there is a peculiarity from France here, because we believe Spain is the second market. French people think they are the first or the second.
I see.
But Spain is, you know,
Yeah.
Spain has almost 80 million tourists a year. And there is a lot of situations, a lot of cases, injuries, and it's a lot of industry around this.
Even the values. I was talking to a gentleman again in Argentina. We were in this room talking about sexual abuse. You know, it's horrific as some of the things you spoke about. And they said the value for a death is $150,000. So for sexual abuse, it's even less. Here in New York, we have foster care agencies when the parents can no longer take care of their children. Let's see this.
I can show you this is something very interesting. This is an example study. It's a case of death of a person in a car accident. 41 years old is a calculation that has been done. A man, 41 years old, and annual income 40,000 euros annual. No? So the indemnity in different countries in Europe. You see that the most high indemnity is Italy, 1.9 million.
1.9 million lira? Euros.
Almost $2 million.
For the death.
For death.
For them, no? So the second one is France. It's almost 1.2, 1.3 million.
Wow.
Germany is almost 1 million. England, 1 million, 1,050,000. And then Spain, 600.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So-
this is the death of a 41-year-old.
Yeah, this study very interesting. I can pass to you.
Yeah.
But you know what the big difference is in this calculation? Is in the non-pecuniary damages. You know, is the suffering, is the pain.
And is that calculated in there?
It's
So-
just pecuniary or non-pecuniary damages. So the big fact is in Italy, the calculation of the non-pecuniary damages is more than 1 million.
Yeah, more than one. But the contradiction is that if you don't die, which everybody hopes, at least, and you suffer injuries a lot, if they don't pay you, I mean, I have a friend of mine who suffered a very big injury because he passed to the traffic light with a green light. Okay, fine. A car passed with a red light and hurt him at the leg. He is in the hospital. He entered into the hospital January 2022. He's
Wow,
still
so
in
it's
the
over a
hospital.
year.
And the companies are now fighting because of an hypothetical mistake into the operation, in the surgery. So nobody wants to pay. So, but at least there have been a suffering, at least there have been a mistake in the, but nobody wants to pay. He paid a lot of money in 2 years. So this is a problem for the insurance. So we should find a way to avoid for a victim like that to find himself without money, without work, can't work,
Is the United States on that chart?
No.
So we practice in the same. You're sitting down. You're sitting down. So these are not. There's nothing funny about it, but we sometimes say, if you hit someone in the street, you're better off, and you hurt them badly, you're better off backing the car up and kill them.
Wow.
Because for death, it's not necessarily as high as someone like your friend who's in the hospital a year and a half, has multiple surgeries, may never be the same. The pain and suffering awards can go $5 million, $10 million, $15 million. Wow. We have the highest award ever is I think now just for past pain and suffering, I think is about $12 million for burns. Right?
Say Giannis.
Yes, the case Ben tried, the burn cases.
Yeah.
Right. So and burns. This is a one-off.
How much the person makes, right? It could be a very rich
No.
man or poor.
No, it does.
It does.
Oh.
So if Rafael is making $1 million a year American, then that's going to factor into how many years left do you have to work.
Okay.
And if the other guy's
Okay,
making
because-
$20,000 as a chef,
Okay.
but that's
No, because I thought the big bulk was suffering. So.
suffering because I have to now walk with a limp.
Right.
So that's where the big bulk is coming from.
Well,
Past.
but it doesn't make.
And
I mean, if
future.
it's suffering, does it make difference if you're rich or poor in the calculation?
No.
No.
Oh.
In fact, that's sometimes the.
Okay. Well, I appreciate it. I want to continue contributing to this conversation because my name is Nathan Werksman. I'm an attorney at firm Merson Law here in New York City. It's great to be here. I studied abroad in Spain, in Seville, which was the last time I was around this many Spaniards, and it's good to be back. And I've never met Jeff Korek in person until today, but it's an honor to be on this panel with him. He really is a.
But you met my grandson before you met me.
That's right. That's right. Jeff's grandson and I go way back. We attended a music class together with my son, who's about his age. But getting to something that Jeff was talking about bicyclists in New York City, it's a kind of it's a personal thing. I grew up in Los Angeles. I grew up in the suburbs of LA where you couldn't walk anywhere. I couldn't see my neighbor. You have to drive to do anything. You're in a car constantly. And I came to school on the East Coast, and I moved to New York after college, and I fell in love with the kind of place where you can walk everywhere. Your life is not car dependent. New York has made a lot of gains. Bloomberg put in a lot of bike lanes, but what New Yorkers and Americans have refused to do is make cars less dangerous for the people outside the cars. For decades, there was an intense focus on making cars safer, and the focus was almost entirely on protecting the people inside the car. Airbags, seat belts. When you're in a car, driving in a car inside a vehicle is a pretty safe proposition now in the United States. Cars are very safe. The flip side is that cars have become increasingly dangerous to the people outside the cars. I don't know if, one of the big contrasts with Europe is not just how we in the United States, especially in New York, which is so tragic, allow cars to be everywhere, which is about to change. And next year, when we have this conference, congestion pricing, which I'm going to get to in a second, will be in place, which will charge people to enter Manhattan south of 60th Street. $15 to $26 is what they're talking, which is modeled after what they've done in London, and I think that Milan has that as well, which is fantastic. But cars in New York City are in the United States are laughably large. I mean, if you see like an Escalade, which are often driven by taxi drivers, livery drivers, I'm 6'1". These cars are up to my shoulder. It's insane. And they're driving around New York City, which really you don't need a car to get around, driving one person. So forget about the climate implications, forget about the enormous waste of resources. You've got a city that is trying to get people on bikes, but has not really done anything to make it, to deal with the other side of the equation, which is now that you've got people on bikes, but you've got cars more cars on the street as ever, and they're as dangerous as they've ever been to people who are outside the car. So after 7 years of fighting, New York City is implementing congestion pricing, which will charge people to enter Manhattan below 60th Street. That was, the final approval was about a month ago. Over the next 11 months, they will be setting up cameras. You enter that, you're going to get charged. And hopefully that will dramatically decrease the amount of cars that are in Manhattan. Because
we thought it would have been a dramatic decrease of traffic.
Yeah.
It didn't happen.
Interesting. Well,
It also
I'm
hurts
hopeful.
It hurts the little guy who's just coming in to pick up his kid from school or to drop
Right.
something off. So
Right, there's a debate about who it's affecting. I think, 85% of people who live in Manhattan do not own a car. So the drivers are not a huge demographic. And they're working on carve-outs for people who really do need to drive into the city. But we'll see if next year we'll talk about whether or not it's successful. But what is really interesting about the United States, and I think is surprising to Europeans, is how easy it is to sue, how low the standard is in court. And so I'd encourage any tourist who comes here and unfortunately gets hurt, hire a lawyer. Really, I mean, first of all, in a personal injury lawsuit, the plaintiff does not pay anything out of pocket up front. Attorneys are paid on contingency fee. So we get a percentage of what the ultimate recovery is at the end. So it costs nothing, literally nothing. It's a signature on a page to hire an attorney. Yeah, I mean, it's... Right. Right.
We're not allowed. That's one of the problems.
And listen, and being able to litigate on contingency fee was a big fight. And New York is the home of personal injury law in the United States. It developed in the 20s. There's a famous judge, Judge Cardozo, who was a judge on New York's Supreme Court that oversaw the development of tort law in New York State. And originally, personal injury lawyers, I say originally, but it's still, Jews were personal injury lawyers. I think Jeff's Jewish, I'm Jewish. We're still a lot of Jews who are personal injury lawyers, but originally they were discriminated against. It was illegal to work on a contingency fee. It was illegal to front costs. What we do now, when you not only do you not pay for an attorney up front, the attorney fronts all the litigation costs.
and there's no loser pay rules.
And there's no loser pay, even here.
Because I had a similar cases years ago here to recover some money from my clients, but the lawyers here wanted to be repaid by the cost. Whatever cost, the out of pocket we have, my clients have to pay.
Yeah.
Contingency fee will concern an amount, a certain cost, but other costs out of pocket or whatever other costs they have to pay. In certain cases, they are very high.
Right. I mean, that's at the end of a case. You get let's say you recover $1 million. The fee comes off the top, which is typically a third in a standard personal injury case, and then the costs are taken off of that. But all the costs are fronted.
Okay.
And you don't charge interest.
Yeah.
Right.
And also, I believe the behavior of the judges, the courts are quite different. I think in Italy it's more in favor of the, let's say, victims. I can say Spain, for example, is a very bad example of this because the indemnity in Spain, to get an indemnity indemnization, is the court thinks sometimes that the victim is trying to get be rich.
Right.
To get
Right.
Yeah, it's a kind of cultural issue. This is the reason why we have so low indemnity.
Yeah.
In Spain, there is a system which is called in Spanish the baremo. Baremo is a calculation method. It's a formula. You have it in an Excel spreadsheet, and you make all the
Yeah.
all the things that we have in an accident, and you get the result.
Mhm.
And this is applied for car accidents, and the result is applied also for other kinds of injuries. No?
Yeah.
So
But listen, ours, New York is,
Is the government issue from time to time? For example, last year they issue updating of that. Because it was something like 10 years with all figures. But it's very difficult for a court or a tribunal to go up of these amounts. And the reason is that the insurance industry has a huge power of influence.
Yeah.
They really write, they make the work for this law. This is quite, let's say, sad. It's really,
That's very interesting because really the same power of the insurance companies, but what concerns the capacity of the victims to obtain damages. Neither there is a kind of philosophy to protect the victims, and I understand and I support that. But it overpassed the threshold because, for example, in the medical malpractice, which we practice a lot, almost all assume to be victims of whatever malpractice. Consider that more than 90% of the criminal claims are lost, and almost 90% of the criminal claim have been.
When you say criminal, you mean medical malpractice?
Not medical malpractice, which is criminal.
Yeah, here it's not criminal, but yeah.
And,
But by the way, the percentage here in New York, for example, which I can tell you, is probably close to 90% of the cases that get tried
yeah,
are lost.
right.
yeah,
Because there's a sentiment in favor of physicians in hospitals. As there-
Especially now after COVID, too.
Yeah, as there should be, right? As there should be.
yeah, exactly. Because most of the people wants to get money from whatever, and they wants to get it for the consensus, for example. I didn't provide a consensus for you to wonder how can which is the kind of consensus. Describe which kind of consensus. The American side, a kind of book, or the European side, 2 words, but whatever it is.
But in the States, very few, I practice medical malpractice, your firm, we don't take those cases. Not just our firms, because they're typically losers. The jurors, if you signed it, don't come to me to say you didn't know there were risks. You can bring a lawsuit for other reasons, but not because you want to contest that you gave permission. But I don't want to take time away from Nathan.
But Nathan,
No,
just one question.
Sure.
If Jeff is saying, you've got like layers of insurance and it generally works well, how come you need to sue? Do you need to sue?
Yes, because they don't want to pay.
Yeah.
Ever.
You don't have to.
Oh,
You don't
okay.
have to, but you could call the insurance company
Okay.
and you could say, this happened to me. And the insurance company is going to say, okay, here's $25,000.
Oh, okay.
So, but it's funny because the litigation is the language that the insurance companies speak to.
Okay.
Because they pay for the defendant's law, they pay for the defendant's lawyers. So let's say you're driving a taxi, you hit me, I sue you. You call up your insurance company and say, I'm a defendant in a lawsuit, and they hire a law firm for you that then represents you, pays their legal bills. Litigation is the language that all the parties speak.
One question. How much is the difference between let's say, the first offer of the insurance company
Right,
and the
yeah.
result if you sue them?
I mean,
For example, in US.
The gap is tremendous. So there are cases that Nathan and I are calling up. They'll offer $50,000. Then maybe as you get closer to trial, because there's no interest.
Yeah.
So if the case could take 3-4 years, they're holding on to the money. And then maybe when you get trial, now I'm just using examples, now they'll offer $150,000. You say, well, you want, now you pick the jury.
Okay.
Start calling witnesses. Now we want to pay you $300,000.
Oh,
So it's a game.
Yeah.
But you would expect that not many cases end up with a sentence, right? Because
going to trial, correct.
Yeah,
I think
because
it's
if
like
you go to trial-
2% of cases go to trial. It's very rare, but that's the risk, and that's why certain attorneys get better results. When Jeff Korek has a case, the insurance company knows that
Right.
he can try the case and get a verdict.
Okay.
That's why they pay higher
I
than.
paid him to say that.
Yeah. I would have said that about whoever was sitting in his chair. No, but.
Jeff
Say it otra vez?
Yeah.
What did he say?
You're a killer.
Killer. Yeah.
The gap is not so high. So it's very difficult to go up to those thresholds. But and the insurance company always get to the end. They pay only at the end of the case.
But Francesco, who makes the, I'm going to tell you the determining factor, I think. Who makes the judgment as to how much money the person gets? A judge?
The judge.
We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 people come into the courtroom and they decide.
Right.
So if you're the insurance company, you don't have any control of them, and I don't have any control of them. It's a risk. Jury.
Right.
The big difference is that one.
Somebody
Right.
said our system using jurors is the worst system, except for all the others.
How do you manage, I think, many times I ask myself, Americans are able to manage, because there are so many cases that you have to join juries and to manage this situation.
We have a clerk of the court, and his job is the clerk of the jurors. And every day in Manhattan, for example, they'll send out 10,000 notices. 3,000 people respond, 2,000 need an adjournment, 1,000 can't. And every day the jurors come in, Monday through Thursday, down here at 60 Center Street.
Yep.
And they're there.
You have to make the election of the people.
Yes, yes. It's called voir dire. Both attorneys participate and talk to jurors, and you want to get the jurors you think are going to be good for your case, and you want to get rid of the jurors you think are bad.
It's the greatest equalizer.
Yeah.
I know you represent so many insurance companies in Spain, and you have very high-level, sophisticated people. And we have the same in the States. They could sit around the boardroom. They could conference the case. Then they come to the courthouse, and you're trying the case, and you see them sitting there. All of a sudden, they're not so comfortable.
And you guys have like the same jury like procedure for criminal and from civil?
No.
No.
Different judges. In civil in New York, it's really crazy. It's not like this in many other states, because I practice in California as well. In New York, both attorneys, the defense and this plaintiff's attorney, if it's a one-on-one case, go into a room with 60 people, and they don't come out until they've got a jury.
Okay.
In criminal,
And no judge.
and no judge.
Okay, in civil.
In civil.
Okay.
In criminal, it's much more closely supervised by the judge because of constitutional rights that the defendants have to be protected throughout the process. But you pick a jury, and there's all this gamesmanship about voir dire and how you're selling your case from the first minute, and you want jurors you like, and the defense attorney is reporting back. Juror 2, 3, and 6 are bad. They're laughing at everything the plaintiff's attorney is saying. They seem to like him or her. They don't, and that's being reported back to the insurance company. Sometimes in trial, you'll have an insurance adjuster come in and watch the trial.
It's a great,
So it's
it's a
basically
great equalizer.
all it's a great negotiation.
Yes.
At the end of the
Yes.
day, it's a big negotiation with the insurance and.
Or listen, my job in my law firm is to just try the cases that don't get settled. So I assume if we started, we're going to finish.
Okay.
And then the jury will give us the verdict. Now, sometimes along the way, the money is either it's so good, or you feel like the trial is going so poorly, you take what they're willing to offer. So it's not really all the negotiations usually gets done, and then there's a little bit of room left to negotiate a little more while you're on trial.
Okay, so you usually take the cases up to sentence, right? Up to the end.
Not when it comes in the door.
Oh.
4 years it's being worked on by the firm. The last 2 months you're trying the case.
But
Let
you
me
agree, a
ask
lot
you
of
something.
cases settle during trial.
Oh.
That's a time that's often, because they won't offer money. Sometimes they want to test you. They won't offer money until you're at the courthouse steps, or they think your case sucks, and then they hear back that your opening statement's really good, or that their witness did really poorly, and sometimes they offer money that it's not even close to anything they've offered before, and you'd settle a case during trial.
How much time is a potential duration of the
Yeah,
trial?
trial. Yeah.
More
So sometimes it takes us 2-3 weeks to pick the jury.
continuously. You mean continuously?
5
Day
years.
by day.
Yeah.
Because in nearly three weeks, which means 15 days, could occur in 3 months or 3 years.
Because they space it out.
Oh wow. You basically
Well,
you get it.
It can take 10 years.
Wow.
Well, I've heard that. So it doesn't pay to
It's
bring the
ridiculous.
case.
It's ridiculous.
Right, we were talking about the other night. Right?
Normally, it's very good because
What's the 4.5 is the,
The ratio between lawyers and judges, no?
Okay.
Is there are 4.5 times more lawyers than judges. And there is a lot of,
Judges got it.
you know, the
Yeah.
number of cases
The congestion of
now,
the,
let's say, waiting for solutions, 1 million.
yeah.
Wow.
well, COVID hurt us.
Yeah, so,
Because COVID
personal
hurt everybody.
injuries normally it takes, if you are lucky, 6 to 7 years.
Yeah.
But we have got cases for 1, 3 years.
New York is pretty slow. New York is pretty slow.
The company is squeezing
Right.
maximum and
They,
Yeah.
they do the same test.
the legal cost, the cost that the company has for this delay is nothing.
Right.
So maybe has to pay.
Right.
The defense lawyer.
Yeah, but it's not the money you have to pay for the contract lawyer. It's not what really you pay him. It's a quantity that is decided by the court.
Ah,
And it's
interesting.
not 100%. Maybe they pay you 50%,
Oh, wow.
40%.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's a kind of, they have a calculation method, and they always pay less than
That actually helps
market
us.
price, not market price. So-
In New York, some of the lawyers are charging $500, $700, $800,000 an hour to the insurance companies.
Yeah.
And so that clock is ticking the whole time the case is not a trial.
Yeah.
So- but sometimes they don't
It's
care
very
and they're
cheap
willing to.
I think the question is that for the insurance company is cheap to wait.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
So wait and see the last-
Sure,
Definitely
you know,
cheaper
because,
to wait.
because in Colombia still, because if you get condemned, still you need to collect the money, and there's a space for negotiation. So even though I lost, right, and I get condemned to, I don't know, say what, a million or whatever, you still, you know, you say, okay, do you want the million in 10 years,
Yeah.
or do you want the 500 now, right?
We have that because we have an appellate court.
Oh.
So we can say, okay, in 2 years you'll get another decision from the appellate court. Maybe we'll have to pay you, maybe we won't. But then we have interest. And then all of a sudden they start thinking maybe it's
Right.
not such a good idea.
Okay. Well, quite interesting. I think there was another,
I think Teodora who said she may.
I think he's not present.
No.
Christopher Deacon. So, okay. So, maybe the, you know, for you want to make any comments or something?
What countries are you from, by the way?
I'm from Italy. I work with
Oh,
Francesco.
yeah. And what about you?
Danielle is my wife. She's a physician. She's a physician and a medical. So a psychiatrist.
Psychiatrist.
Yeah.
Sydney's brother, my son, is a physician. So when I say, you know, I like the fact that people are always in favor of the doctors in New York. Most times, we try a lot of medical malpractice cases. You have to have good proof. Okay, you know, people say, oh, New York, they're giving away the money. You better have good proof. You better prove your case. You better know what you're talking about.
Oh, you know, I didn't know that because in Colombia, we, like, right now, like, 40 years ago, like, suing a doctor was, of course, out of the, because, you know, you had, like, the priest and the doctor and, well.
Same here.
yeah,
but
but-
maybe 60 years.
But now in Colombia, people are saying, okay, now being a doctor in Colombia, it's like in the United States that you get sold all the time, and we have like that image
Yeah.
that here the physicians, the doctors get sued a lot, and that first like
Depends on protective medicine. I mean, all the exams they order for you is to protect the medical. I mean, I
Yeah.
order for you
Yeah,
all the
right. Yeah,
exams,
for sure.
all the controls,
As it
all the
should,
checks.
yeah.
especially
so
if
that
you work in a
cannot-
hospital, a big hospital,
to,
yeah.
to build up the proofs of your innocence, and which is a real cost for the national system,
Yeah.
and which is a really great cost, and which is the reason why the hospitals have not enough money to pay the insurance because the insurance costs are really a lot. That's the problem.
But you know,
Yeah.
like now that we're talking about in the United States, since you have like mostly private funding in the health, who covers the cost? If I'm in the hospital and I don't have insurance and I need the money, like, isn't that a leverage for the company to?
Who covers the cost of the insurance premium that they're paying to the insurance company?
No, like,
So
like
the-
if,
Who
so
co- sorry, give me the question again. Who covers
like
it?
if I'm really like I'm a tourist here, I don't have health insurance
Yeah,
or
yeah.
whatever,
They can
and
stay-
I stay, I don't know, 1 month in the hospital,
Right.
and I need to pay the hospital and I don't have money, wouldn't that like make an offer more attractive from the insurance who says like, oh, I'll give you anything, and because I need to pay, because in Italy and Spain you've got like a general welfare state who covers, you know, the health. So
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
It could be a problem for a
but
tourist.
here you need to pay.
We have a net that will give you the basic services that you need. They're not going to let you die in the hospital.
Right.
But you're going to get a bill when you get home.
But let's say, you know, the baseline, the kind of basic care that you get is called Medicaid in the United States. You don't have insurance, so it's really the basic level. If you spend a month in the hospital, let's say you get hit by a taxi, you spend a month in the hospital, Medicaid will pay for that, but then Medicaid will assert a lien against the person. Let's say you go to trial and this taxi happens to have
so
$1
you
million
have to pay.
policy. The Medicaid will assert a lien. They'll send you a letter to the attorney. We have a lien against the proceeds from the personal injury lawsuit. And then at the end of the case, you resolve the case, and Medicaid will send the lawyer a lien for this amount, and you got to negotiate.
Okay.
So sometimes
so
it'll
the
come
victim
out.
does not pay it.
Well, out of the
For tourists, though, you may get a bill from Medicaid wanting their money.
right.
I think in Europe we have it the same. We have some cases from German tourists,
Yeah.
like suffered damages in Spain, insurance company, we receive the issue from the insurance company of the tourist, and also when they come back to the country, we have to be inflated by the German health system, and then the German health system sue the insurance company, the hotel, or whatever.
Wow.
To get the money back.
So this is very useful. I think in Italy it's the same. Yes, exactly. Okay. Maybe you want to say something? Yeah. Because also you are in this field.
Yeah, well, I actually was, when you were all talking about insurance earlier, I was also just thinking of the case we were coming together that the insurance companies make it very hard to know what their maximum is. So you have to do like a whole, I mean, sometimes they wait the case or you go to trials, or you have to get the court to ask them to tell you what they are able to pay. So that's really frustrating too, because you don't even know what they can offer.
If we were up against Rafael, I would call him up and say, Rafael, please, stop playing games. Tell me how much insurance there is. That's the difference.
Okay. Well, I have just one question. What do you have any experiences in kind of massive trucks or class actions regarding, for example, air crashes or train accidents or whatever, where there is a lot of people involved from different nationalities in your career?
I had on the other side, on the other side of the wall, I was assisting the defendants, and not from injuries. From injuries, yes, we have in the train accident that was defending the defendants, but we have not class action mainly. We have some difficulties, so they have to go to. Everybody has to go to one single lawyer, and the single lawyer has to prepare the single claims, etc. So it occurred to me in the train accident and in the asbestos case, where we have to fight and to deal with dozens of victims and the parents and relatives with the victims. So, but they have to go to a single lawyer or several lawyers who have not class action as you have, which is much easier to deal with. And it's quite difficult for the victims in a case like that one to go together against somebody. It's much easier, for example, financial crimes, when you are a client of a bank and the bank is sued for market rigging or whatever, and the bank says, listen, I'm innocent, but I'm paying a lawyer for you if you want to submit. So I select a lawyer, and everybody will go there, and because it's easier, because at the end, nobody does it in a hard way, because the bank pays
bank
a
selected
lot,
the lawyer,
the
yeah.
bank pays a lot, but there are dozens or hundreds of, really thousands of clients of the bank with only a single lawyer. So it's easier because of the defendant is big. But in the case of crash or fire accidents or crash accidents or asbestos cases, it's really difficult for the victims.
We've handled a number, but the one we're handling now is, again, I'm embarrassed to say, we had our Marines, who were all in North Carolina at a basic training camp, and they were polluting the water. It was actually one dry cleaners that cleaned your suits and your shirts, pouring the chemicals into the water, and that was the water supply for the entire base. And so we had miscarriages, cancers.
It was one dry cleaner?
It was one dry cleaner.
Wow.
And so we have 500 claimants that were former Marines, and there are probably 1 million people that were served on that island, and there's probably a couple of 100,000 cases. They're all being collected now, and then the statute will expire on that in, I think, November of next year. So then we'll know how many we have. But they're very difficult to manage because you have that many clients to respond to.
We have had cases, but individual people in our cases. But we have a very interesting case that you remember that something like 10 years ago, there was the traffic was closed because there was a strike of the
Yeah, I
air
remember this.
controllers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So we make a suit. Spain doesn't exist the class action, but we make a collective action. Around 5,000 people against the government for these all the damages because there was a lot of situations due to this strike, and then we get 40 million euros
Wow.
as indemnity for all these people.
What types of people were the 5,000 people that bring in the lawsuit? They were truckers or they were businesses?
They were the citizens that were traveling because they stopped the operations in the airports
Wow.
just in half an hour. So there was no.
Oh, so they couldn't get back.
No notice. They simply the air controllers decided to stop because there was a fight for the salaries with the government.
How long did it go on for?
They stayed 1 week, but because as soon as the government realized
They were
what was
crippled.
happening, they sent their forces to and they entered the airport. They sent their forces. I am a friend of the general who was the lead the airport of Madrid, and they didn't expect the reaction. But the fact is that until they took the control again, it was closed for almost 36 hours.
Wow.
So there was a lot of damages. And after, I think it takes us 6 years. And it was a fine, we make a final. We should everybody.
Yeah.
With the government, you mean? With the government, you agree?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you can make agreements with the government.
Yes.
Oh.
And now also, I don't know if it is the COVID pandemic.
Yeah.
We also have make a suit against the government. It's a kind of pecuniary responsible of the administration. It is a law for that.
What's the theory that the government did wrong?
The theory is that the criteria we have used is that it is a constitutional right to receive indemnity when the state or government makes a decision that covers your
But they have to indemnify.
yeah, and then because finally the decision closed everything was declared not unconstitutional by the constitutional court in Spain.
That's important. So your constitutional court decided that the closing was unconstitutional.
Unlike here. So you know they say humility is the ultimate achievement. So I'll tell you this, we took 100 lawsuits on behalf of businesses and sued the insurance companies to say you made a contract, couldn't say anything about COVID because nobody knew what COVID was. And we said you have to now pay these companies. If you close this building down and they can't rent it out, we want money because we have insurance. And they said we have an exception for COVID. So when I say humility is the ultimate achievement, we lost every case.
Yeah, and also
Yeah.
We lost every case.
Those haven't gone anywhere in the United States.
we tried first with the insurance companies, but we realized that there was no way of this strategy because there was some, the judges, regional judges decided no, and then forget it. We went.
There's actually a case going to court of appeals now in New York, which is interesting.
The case is our case is in the High Court. Yes,
That's terrific because they've been screaming that in the United States. It's unconstitutional, it's constitutional, and nobody's listening to them. But that's where sometimes politics trumps law.
But one of the interesting things of this decision is that they said, okay, all this was illegal, but there is no pecuniary responsibility to the administration. But from this day on, so all the cases that were settled before are okay. So that's political. This is Spain. This is not.
So they paid on the old. They paid on the other
All the
case.
people who had sued before
Wow.
the decision, they can continue, but
No more.
there was no way for because there were obviously thousands.
I was going to say it's better than the other way around.
Yeah.
Going forward.
In Colombia, we've got, I think we copied it from Italy, I'm not sure. That's when you're suing the state, right? That's like a different jurisdiction, it's a different logic, it's everything, different. And one of the theories is, we'll translate it like the unjust harm. It's an objective responsibility of the state. Like if, for example, you have a terrorist attack, right, and you suffered harm, you do not need to prove that the law enforcement, that the police were negligent or whatever. It's just okay. You suffered a damage. The state must pay for you. It's called the unjust damage. And if we factor that in the discussion, then Colombia has a big history in in terrorist attacks and so we have class action. We do have it, and those are like way millions and millions and millions of pesos, which it does not amount to a lot of dollars because of but in Colombia it's very significant. So if a terrorist group just like bombs, whatever,
Right.
and you lose a family, that's like so certain. That's like for sure you're gonna get money, but not in 1 year. It's probably 10 or
10
15
years.
years.
In the United States, the general understanding is that the government is immune. You cannot sue the government. But there are exceptions, and those have to be passed by Congress or by the state government that allow that. And there are a lot of lawsuits against the city and the state.
But what about
but they
police
have to be
abuse? Like
Police abuse.
Police abuse is part of it. I mean, but that has to be explicitly allowed by statute or by case law.
but it's super difficult, right, to succeed in a case of
The Camp Lejeune cases, the Marine Corps.
Right.
Until we changed the law, not we had to lobby Congress for 5-10 years
Yeah.
to change it. Soldiers could not sue the government.
Yeah.
So if you're a Marine and you get hurt or whatever happens to you, it's too bad. You signed up for
in
it.
Colombia. It's the opposite. It's like
Right.
okay,
Interesting.
And
It's
terrorist,
for sure you can do it, but it's,
terrorist attacks are always the exclusion.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
It is very difficult because now we have a case of maybe it sounds to you because
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And
Yeah, oh, yeah.
the lawyers, we have a number of customers who are former members of the Air Force, of the military, the army, and so on.
Yeah.
Because they were in contact with this, no?
Yeah.
So they can hire U.S. firms
Yeah.
to sue if they're U.S. manufacturers.
We make an agreement with one law firm, I don't know because it's another partner.
Milberg, probably.
Yeah.
I think so.
I will send to you because
Yeah.
we have an office in one which is specialized in this topic.
Yeah.
And
That's a specialized area of law in the United States, the lawyers who do the asbestos. Yeah.
technically speaking, everything, you know. And then there is a lot of members of the army and the forces, especially the armed forces,
I'm sure.
who suffer cancer and so on because of this.
We assisted a Brazilian state company against some soldiers and syndicalists from the soldiers that assumed that it was a liability from the company to have submitted the asbestos to them in years.
Yeah.
And
That's okay in the United States. Soldiers can sue companies. That happens all the time.
It was a company
Yeah.
The private company.
You can't sue the government, right?
owned by the state, by the country. So it was an important, really important company owned by the country.
Yeah.
But we won because it's a kind of way to behave by a certain situation to sue the state because of asbestos. Asbestos is a very important situation. And in asbestos case, they always sue the companies, private, public,
Yeah.
always. But it's not so easy to prove the liability for asbestos. It's
Yeah.
really difficult. It's
Yeah.
interesting proceedings, very hard ones because asbestos is a killer.
Right.
But it's quite difficult to link the death or the damages
Right,
to a
to
certain person,
Yeah.
a certain period, with certain.
Yeah, but remember the famous cases in Spain, especially in Spain, of Contergan, of thalidomida. Yeah, so like in whole Europe, Italy also, especially in Germany, there was this in the maybe 1960s, 70s. There was this drug administered. That's his commercial name was Contergan. I think the active principle was thalidomida, which caused malformations. United States was one of the countries in the whole world that did, the FDA said, okay, you're not selling it here. I think it was Pfizer, right?
Was it the
Yeah, it was
equivalent like
Pfizer, right?
thalidomide?
What?
Was it thalidomide? Was the drug?
I
Cause babies to be born.
Yeah,
without-
to be born. Yeah, like United States, FDA said, okay, it's not going to be sent here, but in Spain it costs a lot of damage, and that you can maybe. What happens if I'm saying this because what happens if the FDA, for example, allows a drug that's causing damage? Like, can you sue the FDA or the government? Well. Or
Our
for example-
government is very well protected.
Can't sue the
Because if you got a building or whatever and it's constructed, someone because of corruption or whatever gave them a license to do something and it falls apart and causes damage, can't you sue the government because they issued a permit?
No, but you can sue all the contractors related to the building.
Okay, so the government
You don't need the government.
And they have tons of money, especially if it's a big building. They'll have tons of insurance. So
Okay.
yeah.
So, thank you. It has been very interesting.
Yeah, thank you. You did a terrific job.
Thank you.
And of course, if you visit Spain anytime, just
And
let me know.
And
Yeah.
you have offices in some of the most beautiful places in Spain, if I remember, Malaga and yeah.